The mythology of the bold and the beautiful has always thrived on the idea that death is never as final as it appears and that identity, once fractured, can be weaponized. What unfolds now pushes that philosophy into its darkest, most psychologically perilous territory, a story not of love triangles or impulsive betrayals, but of erased faces, stolen lives, and the terrifying question of whether truth can surface before intimacy becomes irrevocable. At the center of this storm is Luna, a woman the world mourned, whose survival was not an act of fate, but of ruthless intention, and whose transformation turns the concept of trust itself into a liability. Luna's survival is not revealed as a miracle. It is exposed as a calculated rebirth. After disappearing under circumstances meant to convince everyone she was dead, Luna does not simply hide. She remakes herself. Through extensive facial reconstruction, she reshapes her appearance to mirror Dylan, not as a crude imitation, but as a near-perfect replication. This is not vanity or desperation, it is strategy. Luna understands that in a world where faces grant access, and familiarity lowers defenses, resemblance is power. By choosing Dylan's face, she chooses proximity to Will Spencer, to his life, his trust, and his unresolved guilt. The real Dylan never understands the danger she is in. She senses unease, perhaps, a feeling of being watched, of moments where reflections linger too long or voices echo strangely. But she cannot imagine that her very identity has been selected for erasure. Luna's move is swift and merciless. Dylan is killed, her life extinguished not in a public spectacle, but in isolation, where truth dies quietly. In the aftermath, Luna steps fully into the role she has prepared for, occupying Dylan's name, her access, her emotional history with Will. To the outside world, Dylan lives. Only Luna knows the cost of that illusion. The brilliance and horror of Luna's plan lies in its simplicity. She does not rush Will. She does not force intimacy. She allows time and familiarity to do the work for her. Will, already emotionally raw from previous betrayals and revelations, finds comfort in what he believes is a known presence. Dylan, as he understands her, represents history without threat, closeness without immediate consequence. Luna plays this role with chilling precision, mirroring Dylan's mannerisms, her cadence, her vulnerabilities. She understands that seduction is not about desire alone, it is about safety. As Luna, wearing Dylan's face, draws closer to Will, the tension builds toward a moment of intimacy that feels inevitable. This is not portrayed as graphic or explicit, but as emotionally charged, heavy with implication. Will feels the pull of connection mixed with unease he cannot yet name. Something about Dylan feels familiar and wrong at the same time, too knowing, too precise, as if she anticipates his reactions before he expresses them. He attributes this discomfort to stress, to his fractured emotional state, to the residue of past trauma. He does not yet consider the impossible. But cracks begin to appear. Will's strength has never been blind trust, it has been intuition honed by pain. Small inconsistencies surface, details Dylan should remember, but hesitates over, emotional reactions that feel misaligned with shared history, moments where her gaze lingers with an intensity that borders on possession rather than affection. These are not obvious tells. They are subtle, easily dismissed. Yet together, they form a dissonance that Will cannot fully silence. As the moment approaches when Luna intends to fully bind herself to Will through intimacy, believing that crossing that threshold will secure her place permanently, Will's unease sharpens into suspicion. He begins to replay recent interactions, not searching for guilt but for coherence. The memory of Luna, the woman who was supposed to be dead, resurfaces unbidden. He remembers her eyes, her voice, the particular way she expressed longing and resentment. And suddenly, the resemblance is no longer physical. It is behavioral. The realization does not arrive fully formed. It arrives as dread. Will's internal conflict becomes a race against time. Part of him resists the conclusion, because it is too horrifying to accept. The idea that Dylan could be gone, that the woman in front of him could be someone else entirely, feels like madness. Yet the alternative, ignoring the warning signs and surrendering to intimacy, feels increasingly dangerous. Will understands that once certain boundaries are crossed, the consequences cannot be undone. Identity theft at this level is not merely deception, it is violation. In a moment of clarity born from fear rather than certainty, Will chooses caution. He delays. He asks questions that seem casual, but are carefully chosen. He watches for reactions rather than answers. Luna, sensing the shift, tightens her performance. Her urgency increases subtly, her patience thins. She pushes for closeness, framing it as mutual need, as comfort in chaos. The closer she gets to her goal, the more the mask begins to strain. What saves Will is not proof, but restraint. He pulls back before the moment becomes irreversible, citing confusion he can no longer ignore. The withdrawal triggers a reaction in Luna that betrays her. For just a fraction of a second, something cold and furious flashes across her face, an expression Dylan never wore. It is enough. Will understands then that the danger is real, that whatever truth lies beneath this face, it is not the one he trusts. The confrontation that follows is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, surgical. Will demands distance, not answers. He creates space, buys time. That decision, small on the surface, becomes the pivot point that prevents Luna from completing her plan. Whether the full truth emerges immediately or unfolds through investigation and confrontation, one thing becomes clear: Will has avoided a trap designed to consume him completely. The fallout is devastating. The revelation that Luna is alive, that Dylan is dead, that a face has been stolen and a life erased, sends shockwaves through every relationship connected to Will. Trust collapses retroactively. Memories are re-examined. Grief multiplies. Luna's exposure does not bring closure, it brings reckoning. Yet the central question, did Will discover the truth in time, finds its answer not in forensic evidence or confession, but in choice. He chose to listen to unease rather than override it. He chose distance over desire. In a world where intimacy is often the point of no return, that choice becomes the difference between survival and destruction. In the bold and the beautiful, danger rarely announces itself honestly. It arrives wearing familiar faces and borrowed histories. Luna's transformation into Dylan is the ultimate expression of that truth, a reminder that identity can be the most lethal disguise of all. And Will's narrow escape does not mark the end of the threat, it marks the beginning of a far more dangerous chapter, where the enemy is unmasked, but not yet defeated, and where the cost of trust has never been higher. Nothing about this story is resolved neatly. Dylan's death demands justice. Luna's survival demands accountability. Will's intuition demands validation. And the world they inhabit must now face a reality more disturbing than betrayal, that someone can wear the face of the familiar, and still be utterly, terrifyingly unknown. In the shadowed emotional landscape of the bold and the beautiful, intimacy has never been a simple exchange of affection. It is a threshold, a test, and sometimes a trap. When feelings between Dylan and Will Spencer deepen, the connection is built not on explosive passion, but on a slow accumulation of trust, quiet evenings, shared silences, and the fragile comfort of believing that familiarity equals safety. Will does not fall because he is reckless, he falls because he is tired. Tired of suspicion, tired of secrets, tired of living in a world where every emotional step forward is punished by some buried truth clawing its way back to the surface. With Dylan, he believes he has found something grounded, someone who understands the cost of chaos and promises steadiness without demanding vigilance. That illusion holds, until it doesn't. The moment that changes everything is not dramatic. There is no raised voice, no confession, no interruption. It happens in stillness, in closeness, in the kind of private space where people stop performing and simply exist. Will's hand brushes against a part of Dylan's body he has never noticed before, a movement without intent, guided by instinct rather than thought. And then he feels it. A ridge beneath the skin. A line that should not be there. Not rough like an old accident, not irregular like a childhood injury, but precise, deliberate, unmistakably surgical. The sensation is fleeting, but its impact is seismic. Will freezes, not outwardly, but internally. His body continues the motion, his expression remains calm, but his mind fractures into sharp, analytical focus. He has lived long enough around trauma to recognize the difference between scars born of chance and scars created by design. This one tells a story Dylan has never told. It does not align with any injury she has ever mentioned, any vulnerability she has shared in moments meant to build intimacy. The scar feels recent, intentional, and disturbingly inconsistent with the woman he believes he knows. At first, Will tells himself he is overthinking. He has done that before. He has let fear masquerade as intuition, allowed past betrayals to poison present trust. But this time, the doubt does not fade when he tries to dismiss it. It sharpens. The scar becomes an anchor point around which other unease begins to orbit, small inconsistencies he previously ignored, moments where Dylan's memory hesitated, emotional reactions that felt slightly out of sync with shared history. None of these alone would be enough to justify suspicion. Together, they form a pattern too precise to ignore. Dylan, sensing the shift, stiffens almost imperceptibly. The body remembers what the face is trained to hide. There is a flash of tension, quickly smoothed over, replaced by casual deflection. She laughs softly, dismisses the moment, offers a vague explanation that collapses under even the lightest scrutiny. It was an old procedure, she says. Something minor. Something unimportant. Her words are chosen carefully, but they do not land. They float, unanchored, failing to connect with the truth Will feels pressing against his chest. Will does not challenge her, not yet. He understands that confrontation without certainty is dangerous. Whatever this scar represents, it is not something Dylan once questioned. And that alone is enough to confirm that this is not a misunderstanding. It is a fault line. As the moment passes, Will's emotional state shifts from confusion to vigilance. The intimacy they shared only minutes before now feels precarious, almost predatory, not because of what happened, but because of what nearly did. He realizes, with a chill that settles deep in his bones, that he came dangerously close to surrendering himself fully to someone whose identity may not be what it seems. In this world, where faces can lie and histories can be rewritten, physical closeness becomes the final vulnerability. And he nearly crossed that line blind. Over the following days, Will becomes a quiet observer of his own life. He watches Dylan with new eyes, cataloging behaviors he once found comforting. The way she anticipates his emotions too precisely. The way she mirrors his language, his rhythms, as if rehearsed. The way she avoids certain names, certain memories, redirecting conversations with subtle urgency. Each interaction tightens the knot of dread growing inside him. The scar is no longer just a physical anomaly, it is a symbol of something far more dangerous, the possibility that the woman beside him is not Dylan at all. The name Luna resurfaces in his thoughts like a ghost that refuses to stay buried. Luna, who was supposed to be dead. Luna, whose obsession with him once crossed boundaries he did not fully understand until it was too late. Luna, whose emotional volatility and capacity for reinvention he underestimated. The idea feels impossible, and yet, impossibility has never stopped truth from asserting itself in this world. Will remembers the stories, the rumors, the half-buried fears that were never fully resolved. He remembers how grief closed certain doors too quickly, how everyone accepted finality, because it was easier than questioning it. Now, with the feel of that scar burned into his memory, finality feels like a lie. Will's internal conflict becomes unbearable. If he is wrong, if this suspicion is another projection of trauma, then doubting Dylan will destroy what little peace he has left. But if he is right, if the woman sharing his space is wearing another person's face, then every moment of closeness has been a calculated invasion. The choice before him is not whether to trust or accuse, but whether to act before the truth traps him permanently. Dylan, meanwhile, senses the shift acutely. The scar was never meant to be discovered, not like this, not through touch rather than investigation. It represents the one flaw in an otherwise perfect transformation, the reminder that no rebirth is seamless. She understands that Will's strength has always been his intuition, and she knows that once that intuition is activated, control becomes fragile. Her response is not retreat, but acceleration. She pushes for closeness, for reassurance, for intimacy framed as healing. She wants to cross the final boundary, before doubt solidifies into action. But urgency betrays her. Will begins to pull back, not dramatically, not suspiciously, but deliberately. He creates space under the guise of reflection, citing exhaustion, emotional overload, the need to slow down. Each step back frustrates Dylan, though she works hard to mask it. The patience she once displayed begins to thin, replaced by flashes of irritation she cannot fully suppress. For Will, these moments are confirmation. Dylan, the real Dylan, was never possessive in this way. She never pushed. She never demanded closeness as proof. The scar, once a single detail, now stands as the keystone of a collapsing facade. Will knows he cannot confront this alone. Whatever truth lies beneath Dylan's skin carries consequences far beyond his personal safety. If Luna is alive, if Dylan is dead, then a crime of unimaginable scale has already occurred. But he also knows that accusing without evidence could trigger exactly the kind of reaction he fears most. He chooses silence, not as denial, but as strategy. He begins to gather information quietly, to verify memories, to cross-check details that should be simple, but suddenly feel treacherous. Every interaction becomes a test. Every answer, a clue. The intimacy they once shared becomes strained, haunted by the unspoken knowledge that something is deeply wrong. Will no longer touches without awareness, no longer relaxes into moments that once brought comfort. The scar has transformed him from participant into witness, from lover into investigator. And though fear pulses beneath every thought, another emotion begins to rise alongside it, resolve. Will understands now that survival in this world depends not on avoiding danger, but on recognizing it before it takes everything. The story does not yet explode into revelation. It simmers, thick with dread and anticipation. The scar remains unseen by anyone else, but it has already done its damage. It has cracked open a truth that refuses to be sealed again. Whether Will exposes Dylan fully, whether Luna is unmasked before she can strike again, remains uncertain. But one thing is clear, intimacy has failed to trap him, and that failure may be the only reason he lives to ask the question that now defines everything. Who, exactly, is the woman standing in front of him, and how many lives has she already destroyed to be there? The arrival of Katie Logan does not feel like a return, it feels like a declaration. In the ever-shifting universe of the bold and the beautiful, eras rarely announce themselves with banners or speeches. They arrive quietly, through decisions that seem personal on the surface, but carry the force of tectonic change beneath them. This is one of those moments. The fashion capital of Los Angeles, long dominated by a single name and a single mythology, is about to discover that legacy does not guarantee permanence, and that respect, once withdrawn, has consequences that cannot be smoothed over by apologies or nostalgia. For years, Forrester Creations has functioned as more than a company. It has been an institution, a family altar where power, creativity, and loyalty were offered up in equal measure. To work there was to belong, to be replaced there was to be erased. When Ridge Forrester and Brooke Logan decided, quietly, efficiently, and disastrously, to replace Katie, they believed they were making a practical decision. In their minds, this was business. In reality, it was a rupture. They underestimated the symbolic violence of their choice, failing to understand that sidelining Katie was not merely a professional adjustment, but a personal dismissal, one that would reverberate through every relationship connected to the Forrester name. The insult did not go unnoticed. Bill Spencer, never known for subtlety when it comes to loyalty, interpreted the move exactly as it was, disrespect. To Bill, the message was clear. If the Forresters could discard Katie so easily, then they did not deserve her talent, her experience, or her devotion. Bill's response was not impulsive, it was surgical. Where others might have argued or negotiated, Bill chose a far more devastating path. He created an alternative. Not a subsidiary. Not a compromise. A competitor. The wedding gift Bill offers Katie is not jewelry or property, but autonomy. He gives her what the Forresters took away: authority, trust, and the freedom to define success on her own terms. In doing so, he also signals a truth the fashion world will soon be forced to confront: money may not buy taste, but it can absolutely buy opportunity. And when opportunity meets motivation, institutions tremble. Katie's decision to accept Bill's gift marks the true beginning of the new era. It would have been easy for her to refuse, to frame the offer as excess or retaliation. Instead, she recognizes it for what it is: a chance to reclaim her narrative. Katie does not accept out of spite. She accepts out of clarity. She understands that remaining within a system that undervalues her would only prolong the erosion of her confidence. Accepting Bill's offer is not an act of rebellion, it is an act of self-respect. As the new company prepares to launch, anticipation spreads like electricity through Los Angeles. Designers whisper. Buyers speculate. Investors recalibrate. The question is not whether Katie's company will succeed. With Bill's resources, success is almost inevitable. The real question is what form that success will take, and whether it will mirror the traditions that shaped Katie or challenge them outright. The matter of the company's name becomes the first and most potent signal of intent. In a world where branding doubles as lineage, names matter. The bold and the beautiful has never been shy about its symbolism. Spencer Publications, Spectra Fashions, Hope for the Future, and Brooke's Bedroom all wear their identities openly, anchoring creativity to personal legacy. Tradition suggests that Katie will follow suit, perhaps honoring her maiden name and the family values that shaped her. Our Logan brand would be safe, recognizable, and emotionally resonant. Yet safety is not what this moment demands. Katie is not the woman she was when she first entered the fashion world. She has survived betrayal, illness, erasure, and reinvention. She understands now that identity is not inherited, it is asserted. As she weighs the options before her, the naming question becomes a referendum on her philosophy. Does she lean into tradition, reaffirming her place within the established order? Or does she choose something unexpected, signaling a willingness to disrupt not just the market, but the assumptions that govern it? The writers tease the possibility of a less traditional name for a reason. A departure from the familiar would not merely surprise Ridge and Brooke, it would destabilize them. A name unmoored from family legacy would announce that Katie's company is not an offshoot of the Logan or Forrester empires, but a standalone force with its own aesthetic and ambition. It would also challenge the audience's expectations, suggesting that the show itself is ready to evolve beyond the patterns that have defined it for decades. When the name is finally revealed, the reaction is immediate and explosive. Across town, at Forrester Creations, the news lands like a thunderclap. Rich, who once believed that loyalty could be managed and replaced without consequence, is forced to confront the reality of his miscalculation. Brooke, torn between pride in her sister and loyalty to her husband, finds herself caught in an impossible emotional bind. The name, whatever it is, becomes a mirror, reflecting not just competition, but the cost of complacency. Katie's announcement is not grandiose. She does not gloat. She does not lecture. She simply states her vision with calm assurance, outlining a future built on innovation, respect, and accountability. Her confidence is not performative, it is earned. For the first time in years, Katie speaks not as a supporting player in someone else's story, but as the architect of her own. The fashion world responds accordingly. Buyers who once pledged exclusive loyalty to Forrester Creations begin to hedge their bets. Designers who felt stifled by legacy constraints take notice. Investors see not just a rival brand, but a narrative shift, one that aligns with a broader cultural hunger for reinvention over inheritance. Katie's company becomes a symbol of what happens when overlooked talent is given room to lead. Forrester Creations, meanwhile, enters unfamiliar territory. Competition forces introspection. Rich is compelled to question decisions he once considered infallible. Brooke must reconcile her advocacy for women's empowerment with the reality of having participated in her sister's marginalization. The family dynamic strains under the weight of these contradictions, revealing fractures that have long been disguised as unity. Bill watches all of this with a mixture of satisfaction and restraint. He did not build Katie a company to destroy the Forresters, though he would not mourn that outcome. He did it to prove a point: loyalty deserves reciprocity. In empowering Katie, Bill has also reasserted his own influence, reminding everyone that power does not only reside in fashion houses and creative dynasties. It resides wherever resources are paired with conviction. As the weeks unfold, the rivalry intensifies, not through sabotage or scandal, but through excellence. Runway shows compete for headlines. Collections are scrutinized side by side. Critics begin to frame the narrative not as old versus new, but as stagnant versus dynamic. Forrester Creations, once untouchable, must now earn its relevance in a market that no longer assumes its dominance. Katie thrives in this environment. Free from the politics that once constrained her, she makes bold choices, some successful, some risky, all unmistakably hers. She surrounds herself with collaborators who share her vision rather than fear it. In doing so, she cultivates a culture that contrasts sharply with the hierarchy she left behind. Her leadership style becomes part of the brand's appeal, signaling a shift not just in fashion, but in values. The emotional stakes remain high. Brooke struggles to balance sisterhood with partnership, pride with regret. Rich grapples with the consequences of his authority, learning that leadership without empathy breeds opposition. Bill stands firm beside Katie, but even he recognizes that the war he helped ignite may outgrow his control. And Katie, at the center of it all, carries the quiet burden of knowing that her success will be read as indictment by those who underestimated her. This is why the era feels new. Not because a company launched or a name was revealed, but because the story has shifted from inheritance to intention. The bold and the beautiful has always explored power, but rarely has it interrogated the cost of taking it for granted with such precision. Katie's rise forces every character, and the audience, to reconsider what respect truly means in a world built on legacy. In the end, the question of whether Katie chose a traditional name or a radical one matters less than what that choice represents. She has claimed space in a narrative that once relegated her to the margins. She has transformed a wedding gift into a statement of independence. And she has proven that when respect is denied, creation becomes the most powerful form of response. Forrester Creations will survive. It always does. But it will never be the same. The era of unquestioned dominance has ended, replaced by a landscape where talent, vision, and courage must compete on equal footing. And at the center of that transformation stands Katie Logan, not as a disruptor driven by revenge, but as a leader defined by resolve, clarity, and the refusal to be overlooked ever again.